chat. Here we go. Morning, this is Ultra 65, Scottie and Joe. And Joe, this morning, of course, Talk to the Hands is a favourite moment of our week. And Talk to the Hands' wife is with us this morning. Oh, this spells trouble. Good morning, Joe. How are you doing? Thanks for being here.
Good morning, and I'm very well, thank you.
Now, Joe, I've been thinking, Scott, before we started this segment, of course we love playing with the name Hands. I'm really thinking this morning's show should be called Dirt on the Hands.
Messy hands.
Messy hands, even better.
Now, we're not here to get any dirt, of course, on our friend Hans Kilder, but do you have any you can share with us?
That's a very hard question. Of course I have lots and lots of dirt that I could share about Hans, but I think I should say at the baseline he's a very good husband. He actually does his absolute best to do what he says, so it's okay.
Well, he always gives good advice. Look, I know for my wife and I, we just complete opposites, you know, in a good way, in that we complement each other, and from what I've noticed about you two, you seem to be similar.
We are polar opposites, I would say. So, for example, I can list off lots of areas in which we're very different. Hans is a very high energy person and I'm quite low energy. If we go to a party, if he goes into the party feeling a bit down, he'll come out bouncing off the walls. I can go in feeling quite good. I can enjoy the party, but I'll still come home really tired just from being with lots of people. In terms of noise, he likes loud noises and I find them really quite difficult, and if you give me a choice between music and silence, I'll choose silence.
Okay.
So, food, he adores food. I eat food because it keeps me alive. All sorts of ways in which we are different.
So how do you deal with that? Because you, as you say, you're complete polar opposites. How do you manage that in your marriage?
Well, there are two answers. One is with a great deal of effort. So sometimes we actually have to have quite a process of talking through what it is that we're actually meaning, because we're misunderstanding each other. But I think in terms of just in general, we actually see it as a complementarity thing, so we learn from each other. For example, because I'm quite, a bit cynical, a bit self-critical, I find Hans very encouraging, and even though it can be profoundly irritating on occasions, I actually do recognise that it's a good thing. And I have learned to put into my conversations encouraging words, because I felt the value of him on me, being very encouraging and seeking to be positive towards me.
Yeah, wow.
That's great. Now, Hans is obviously very loved by our listeners. There's just insights that he has, and obviously a lot of experience in his counselling. Do you ever feel like I just got counsellor Hans thrown in my face rather than my husband? There must be moments where you just think, oh, I just wish he wasn't a marriage counsellor right now.
Actually, it's sometimes the opposite. We were having an argument once, and I said, Hans, what would you say to a client if the client was actually doing what you're doing now?
He must hate that line.
His response was, Joe, I'm having an argument, I'm not being a counsellor now.
Oh, so it almost flips the other way. I like it.
It does, and it's probably a disadvantage for him, because I know when he's breaking his own rules, so I judge him.
This is such a good talk, Scott. You have no idea how much I'm enjoying this.
I am feeling a little bit disillusioned, because I always kind of thought Hans was like the perfect man, you know, and I'm sure that he's more perfect than most of us, but I'm kind of feeling a little disillusioned right now.
No, I don't think you need to be disillusioned. He's a good man. When we were first going to get married, he said his aim was to be a good husband, good pastor, good counsellor, and a good husband and a good father. And I think 12 years down the track, I think I see the fruit of that strong intention. So I think if you have a vision of the kind of person you want to be, even though the process can be messy and full of mistakes and failures, he actually is a demonstration of the product that comes from that kind of effort.
Now, we just celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary, and you mentioned mistakes and failures. Of course, we all make mistakes and failures, but in some ways that's almost what makes you stronger, is when you can actually deal with those mistakes and failures. How have you put that into practice in your marriage?
For me, I think I always see a situation of conflict as, okay, so I don't understand what's going on here. I have my perspective on what's going on, but this person obviously, in this case my husband, has a very different perspective. And in the battle or the effort to come to a resolution, for me that's about understanding their perspective and being able to take it on board at least as far as I can. There are some situations where you just have to agree to disagree because it's just something fundamental that you both can't understand, but that's pretty rare. I think most of our discussions, and we have a very complicated family situation, so we have a lot of fodder for thinking through issues, but most of our discussions, I think we do come to a point where we actually agree. Perhaps because even though we're polar opposites in many things, we actually have the same values.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's probably the thing.
That's a
that
great
counts.
call. Great point.
If you were to want to pass on some words of wisdom to our listeners, what would be some things that you think make a strong marriage?
The first thing would be that you're in there forever. I think that's probably the most important thing because that gives you a safe foundation on which to have a good argument. Like if you know, bottom line is I love you, you love me, we're going to keep trying, then you can say hard things or hear hard things and know that it's not actually a personal attack on you with the person going to take the option of exiting.
Yeah.
And I think because we've both experienced the pain of that, perhaps that's one reason why we know we're not going to do that. So I think the other one is the whole principle of grace as well as justice. So I think you need to make sure that you yourself are fair to your partner in an argument. You don't use dirty tricks, but you actually stick to what is the problem. And the other one is to be kind, because sometimes you actually can't cope with what's going on. You don't have the emotional or physical resilience to keep going. So kindness, I think, and patience coming out of a commitment to grace and justice.
Now, you know, these sound like all things that you really have to work at, but it's worth it in the long run, isn't it?
Yeah, I do it, so obviously I think so. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think, it's so hard work. It's really hard work. And I think Hans said only a couple of weeks ago, all relationships are high maintenance. And I said, yes. And that was because we'd had about a week of very high maintenance with each other. But then you get the depth and the breadth. So, and I think it's the same with children. Like when I have a situation with a child or several children and it's really messy and really difficult and I have no idea what to do, I actually feel quite confident because I think, well, this is me and my child, we are going to work together to create an adult here. And actually, I might be the adult who's becoming an adult. It's not.
Joe Kelder, of course, doing a little bit more dirt on the hands. Not true, Joe, of course. You're his delightful wife and we enjoy talking to hands pretty well every Friday morning, around 8 o'clock. Joe, we've spoken off air about this concept of calibration, and I find that really interesting. Can you give us some context to what that means?
Yes, well, it comes out of my understanding that I'm a highly critical person, highly self-critical, and someone who actually values criticism much more than praise. And then as my children were going to school and I was aware that other mothers were going, you're fantastic, you're amazing, how great are you? And I was saying, that's good dear, or that's nice. I had to explain to my children, you need to calibrate. Mummy is someone who says good when other mothers say fantastic.
Yeah.
And so if I say that was good, I mean it was really fantastic. And so then when I married Hans, he's a kind of 9 and 10 out of 10 person. If we're sitting on a mountain looking at a view, he's going, isn't it amazing, Joe? And I'm looking at it going, yeah, it's nice. It's nice. So we had to actually have a conversation about that. And he actually encouraged me to shift my strong language for things which was negative language. So I would say things were awful, And so I shifted up to say something was awful nuts, not actually, it's actually just not really nice, not really good. And I've kind of added in some more positive language up the top end because I do see that it's actually better.
Sure.
Calibration. I like it.
Yeah, no, I think it is a really important thing, especially with children, because they may see the mum or the father of another child receiving what they would perceive to be higher praise regularly than they are, and feel somehow disadvantaged, but perhaps it's a different situation that they live in. Mummy and daddy uses different language.
Yeah. And see, I can't actually just adopt high praise all the time because I don't believe in it. I think children need to be able to fail. They need to see that actually they didn't do as good a job as they could have, and if all your language to your children is "you're amazing, you're fantastic," then I think, and this is actually my experience growing up, that when my parents were very positive towards me, I just felt stressed and waited for the failure to come when my whole bluff would be exposed.
Wow.
So for me, when I finally did fail 3 subjects out of 5 at uni one year, it was actually, after a good cry and a cup of tea, it was the best thing that could have happened for me.
Wow.
Because I realised nobody hates you. You can do the subject again. You meet new friends in the new subject. So it was actually a very positive thing in the end.
But it's also that whole concept, as you mentioned before, about complimenting each other. So whereas Hans is high praise and glowing, and you're more controlled in that praise, then you kind of balance each other, and it's probably good for the kids to see both those.
I think so, yeah. And I do think it's really one of the benefits of being married to someone who's really positive when you're negative is that you do actually, if you don't get really irritated by it and just despise it, you actually go, it's a different way of thinking that has advantages. You can actually shift more towards a balanced perspective so that you're not always criticising or always praising. You can do both.
Great stuff. Hey, thank you so much for being
That's
here.
really
We've
profound,
enjoyed
isn't it?
our chats.
Yeah.
You're
Good on you, Joe. Thank you for your time.
Joe Kilder there, and we'll look forward to catching up with Hans on Friday morning. Talk to